And I often think of the enormous sacrifices made by the 100,000 plus that fought at Gallipoli, the Western Front, and all those battles to give us the privilege of living in this wonderful democracy. And there are people out there that have had the temerity of prostituting it. And there are people in the corridors of power that are also disrespecting it. I find that absolutely abhorrent as a proud Australian.
We are here today with the legendary Sam Kekovich, and today we are not doing a lamb ad, are we? We're going to be talking about politics and sports and everything in between, because you're really well known as a legendary sports player and as someone who does the lamb ads and helps with tourism. But what do you think about other things? That's what I want to get to know.
Well, I have a viewpoint on certain matters, a lot of viewpoints, a lot of matters.
Yeah, good.
But anyhow, thanks for a very flattering introduction, Monica. Thank you. I'm a modicum, a little bit of each of those aforementioned. So, but I do, I'm very well opinionated. I think it's everyone's obligation. I think you should have a viewpoint and not accept the status quo.
So, the last 18, 19 months, it's been obviously historical times around the world. What is something that stands out to you about how you feel about how things are going?
Well, I have a viewpoint. I think when we come out of this, whatever it is, I think the one thing that can benefit society enormously is fellowship. I really mean that. I think the art of conversation has been lost. I think the art of compatibility has been lost to a large degree. And what I'd like to see happen, and it's imperative because we can't move forward unless we philosophically change. This notion that, we can't be state governed or we can't have this and we can't have a despot, you're dead right, all those issues. But unless we change, and by that I mean common decency and civility, get back to acquiring some respect, getting back to old traditional egalitarian values. I'm absolutely find it abhorrent that here we are living in the most inclusive, intelligent, diverse society, and we behave appallingly. It is just a travesty of justice. And I often think of the enormous sacrifices made by the 100,000 plus that fought at Gallipoli, the Western Front, and all those battles to give us the privilege of living in this wonderful democracy. And there are people out there that have had the temerity of prostituting it. And there are people in the corridors of power that are also disrespecting it. I find that absolutely abhorrent as a proud Australian.
So for someone who's been fighting for Australia for as long as you live, probably, what do we do? Like, how do we get our beautiful country back?
Well, as a collective, I guess you can do what I just mentioned. My role, I do, I travel the length and width of this country. Fortunately, I've got a wonderful vehicle called the Lamb Commercial, as you rightly alluded to. So, don't ever, you slander me, you can slander me anywhere in the metropolitan area, but don't do it in the bush. Because it's like killing Bambi in the bush. You mention my name in the bush and you try to belittle me there, they'll come looking for you for about 100 miles an hour. But what can we do as a collective? Well, I guess we can start simply by, being the best decent person that we can become. And by doing that as a collective, I think it might hopefully inspire others to follow suit. But, we should always question. We should not allow people to just proceed, in a dictatorial, despotic manner. We should have a voice. And that's been eroded. And that is the first, our wonderful, look, we'll be here for 3 days, you'll start talking to me on that issue. But I often, it deplores me when people say we're racist. We are the least racist community in the world. What we've got is a wonderful, wonderful freedom of speech in this country. And the great thing about our language is a level of irreverence. And satire and tongue-in-cheek. Yeah. So if I said, God, you're a good-looking sort, I keep telling people, it's never in the content, it's in the tone in which it's delivered. My intent was never to demean, defile, disparage or denigrate. It's almost, it's a pat in the back. And why would people be obsessed? I was called a wog, and a Dago and whatever. But, after the event, we'd put our mid out, after on the field of battle, imbibed in a couple of convivials, and it was all forgotten. There was never malice or intent. This pent-up hate, where it's arrived from, I got no idea. But it's the perpetually aggrieved who have missed their life, missed their vocation in life, and all of a sudden they want to impinge themselves on the most inane crusades to try and validate and legitimise themselves. And these protests that are going on, outside of 2 or 3%, the rest are only pissed off because they've either lost their jobs or lost their girlfriends or something's happened, and say, well, this is a good vehicle to get rid of some of my pent-up anger. And that's what happens. But there's some basic fundamentals in our society that we need to preserve that are, sanctimonious.
Well, this is the scary thing. A lot of people would say our freedom of speech protest has been eroded over the last, especially 6 months. And now with this new legislation coming in, it's looking like we may not have freedom of speech again, at least in this state. As someone who's influential like you, is there anything that you're going to plan to do to try and help us?
What's hanging over the Supreme Court? Over the Supreme Court of Australia, of Melbourne.
What is?
What the scales of justice.
Right.
And what's a feature of that scale of justice? Is the blindfold and the pendulum. And Justitia is blindfolded, which depicts the impartiality, regardless of wealth, standing, profile, that everyone is equal in terms of being questioned. Well, now that we're heading towards state powers, being aligned to to where a state determines each and everyone's outlook, we've got some fundamental problems, and that needs to be defended to the hilt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to go to the upper house in 2 weeks.
It will.
Sam.
It's just got to be vetoed. I'm going to say, the degree of resentment out there in the media and everywhere. Not so much. Let me tell you, the media are pretty derelict in this country. And with all due respect to a lot of the media, no, with the greatest degree of respect to yourself. We're talking about it in overseas, like in America, for argument's sake. Now, I don't care what side of politics you stand, but if you tell me that Joe Biden's the best candidate in the field of 360 million people, well, let me tell you, you can batter me over the head with a baseball bat. Well, that's their business.
Yeah.
But even here, the media sometimes are not as robust and as resolute as I'd like to see them. Like look at IBAC currently, what's happening in Sydney. Like they're like a bullpit terrier after, Berejiklian, who's arguably done a fantastic job. But they won't let her go, and they're probing, and probably rightfully so, to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Have a look at our legislature. So we had an inquiry. What did that determine? Millions of dollars. They put their acolytes in charge. A third-grade failed lawyer could have exposed them and could have, given them 12 months. But no, they asked the obvious question. So you've got to question, how determined are we really in certain quarters to reach our objective? We've got a moral obligation to our children. And what about the elders that have built this country? To our Indigenous friends, to our migrants, to our hard-working Australians.
What does fighting look like to you, though? How do we how do we actually proactively try to stop this bill? How do we fight it?
Well, you've got to have voices. People change the landscape. The topography of the world we live in is only changed in history. If you look at it, it's revolutions. But I'm not talking about revolutions, go and find your gun. People power is the most powerful weapon in the world. And, people need to take an interest and understanding of what's going on. A lot of them don't, unfortunately. And the media should play a more prominent role in this. I know certain quarters of the media do, certain don't. And there are divisions and fractions there, unfortunately, or factions, I should say.
And then the alternative media gets censored and silenced, so it's really hard.
Censored and silenced, exactly.
Even members of parliament, Craig Kelly, got censored and silenced.
Yeah, he did.
But what are they so afraid of? What are they so afraid of?
I got no idea. But, to Craig Kelly, I know he's been subject to a lot of criticism. See, I don't really mean specifically I'm supporting Craig Kelly. Perhaps his views are great. But what I do admire about Craig Kelly, he had the strength of conviction, the strength of character to execute his beliefs. And the other thing that I deplore about this country is how conversation has been subjugated.
Yeah.
It is insane. If you've got a view alternate to the general consensus, all of a sudden you compartmentalise as a homophobic or a misogynist or a racist. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm neither of those things.
Yeah.
How dare you do that to me? But I have a view, an alternative view that I'd like to put forward. And I'm entitled to listen. But because we don't have those robust conversations, we never reach a decision on all the hard issues in this country, whether it's the Indigenous issue, whether it's the water rights, whether it's migration. And all we ever do in this country now, because we don't have the genuine balls and the leadership, we band-aid things. We spend billions of dollars band-aiding over the surface without ever reaching a conclusion and never assisting or aiding the core issue.
Using all of our taxpayers' money, of course,
well,
which is great. We didn't choose that. Now, you sound very politically astute. Have you ever considered running for politics?
No, I haven't. I've been asked, but then again, I've been involved in many other issues, so I've never. Plus, someone like me, you wouldn't want me. What am I going to do? Waste my time on the backbench? Unless I can lead the party, it'd be futile.
Okay.
I did have a call once, and I said to the guy who was the head of the party, through a third party, that he'd wanted to suss me out whether I'd be interested.
Yeah.
I said, you're going to tell your boss that I'm deeply flattered that he's asked, but you ask your boss how would it handle being the Deputy Prime Minister. So I don't think I followed through. But the notion and this quality of, with all due respect, you wouldn't hire any of them in the private sector. They wouldn't cut it in the private sector. They gravitate to government. And you have a look at local council and local government. I'm not saying they don't go in there with the best interest and they've got an agenda, but God, strike a light. And people sitting on the back bench for 2 elections and getting a salacious payout. We reward mediocrity. My parents worked 20 hours a day. They were migrants who never knew a word of English. They kissed the dirt when they arrived and were blessed to be emancipated, avoided communism and Nazism. Yeah. There was no dole, there was no childcare. Not that I'm opposed to any of those issues now, to help those that need help. But in those days, they learnt the language, they assimilated, they respected the laws and became true Australians. They were called wogs and whatever, but it was all a part of the Australian way. It's your shout, mate. And, let me tell you, as a kid growing up in country as Victoria, it was heaven. Yeah. We played sport. We never knew what a key was. Hardly heard a harsh word, although I caught my fair share of the cuts and leather straps for poor behaviour. And let me tell you, to this day, whoever's listening and watching this, I had a lot of anger myself growing up when I got whacked all the time. But the 3 people that I respect most in my life? My school teacher that belted the living soul case out of me. My mum who slapped me I don't know how many times. And my science teacher, or the local policeman who kicked my backside that often when he caught me driving without a licence in the bush. So they're the 3 people I respect so much. But they were the ones that imposed some parameters of behaviour.
Yep.
And, people may say, well, you didn't turn out that well yourself, mate. I have transgressed a few times. But the reality is, by and large, I try to be a decent citizen. I know that I probably haven't turned out what Mum and Dad wanted me to do in it, but I'm trying. And I think now I do a lot more good than I probably do harm. And I think if everyone adopts that attitude, I think we're in for a better society. This notion that, there's a million things, but pensioners not being able to flick a switch to cool themselves or heat themselves in an affluent society like ours. And we squander billions. We're going to build some nuclear submarines now are going to get ready in 2090. When
Great, let's deal
we're
with
going to park them all out
now, you know. So talking about that, did you know that, talking about parenting, I'm just going to go off on that a little bit because it seems to me like there's been a progression of government taking over parental sort of rights. It's been happening slowly. And at the moment, did you know that a 12-year-old in a school can give informed consent to get a vaccine without their parental consent? So, you know, what do you think about that?
Well, look, I go back just to extrapolate all that. You know, it wasn't long ago, I guess in the last 15 years, parents can't parent, teachers can't teach, and police can't police. That's how the changing landscape has occurred. You know, the breakdown of the very family fabric of the home unit has eroded the it's been a domino effect. You know, everything we learned as children, or everything that we've achieved, or all our directions, all emanated from home. All the major learnings all emanate from home. Good, thank you, please, yes, no thank you. All the good manners, all that degree of respect, all emanates from home. And then, hopefully, you can go to a school and you'll get a good teacher like I did. And I remember my teachers, Mrs. Mame and all of them, that they were great teachers. We had a great rapport and we respected them. Mm-hmm. And if you'd moved out of sight, you did get the strap. And you get a kick up the bottom. And yes, you do need they never hurt anyone. Every now and again, a whack.
Yeah, a measured one. A measured whack is, I think
well, some in those early days, they were a bit brutal, some of those.
Yeah, no,
I wish they had to be measured.
I had it too. My last smack, I think I was like 12 years old, and I was like, I'm too old for this. But, you know.
None of us were harmed from it.
No.
None of us were harmed. You know, I keep telling people, look, there are two words that best depict the spirit and the essence of being Australian, and that is being fair dinkum. And if they adopted that, let me tell you, there's people out there that are running rampant and are renegades. I don't know why, what's entered their lives, but they only ask themselves, are you being fair dinkum?
That's a quote right there. I can see with your face on social media. Now, I heard something on the radio the other day, and I wanted to ask you about it. So, of course, you know about the fact that mandatory vaccinations has become a thing in Victoria. And I heard specifically the AFL players they have to get the vaccine. Is there any chatter amongst the football people? Are some people not going to get it, or how do they feel about it? Or is there anything you can say about that?
Well, what can I say about it? It's a broad demographic. Yeah. I mean to say, each and every one has got the entitlement to do as they please, in my view. Mm-hmm. But if the evidence is compelling, and as a collective, well, I believe that they probably should. If it's so pronounced and so obvious, the benefits of. But the way that's been sold in this country, let me assure you, well, it's highly. I can understand why people didn't want to get vaccinated. Mm.
Yeah.
But then again, that's all leadership stuff. Same as we got boundaries. We got factions.
But you said it was their choice. Like it should be their choice, right? But they actually cannot play football anymore unless they get it.
Yeah.
That's like not really choice, is it?
Well, no, it's not. But then again, you got to look at the governing body's got to provide a vehicle for them to play, and a safe environment is terribly important. Mm-hmm. So if they believe that by not having a vax player on the field may ultimately lead to the demise of the majority, or then providing the evidence is compelling, as I said.
Have you checked out the evidence? What do you think about it?
Well, only what I read. Yeah. I speak to my own doctor. Yeah. My own doctor said it's viable. I mean, so I'm vaccinated.
Yeah.
I make no bones about that. But whether the evidence supports that, I'm going to get through the break or not, I'm not so sure.
So a question, and again, you don't have to answer this because it's a private matter to be vaccinated.
No, I don't. They ask me anything.
All right, well.
It's my prerogative to respond.
That's true. So why did you get vaccinated?
Why?
Yeah.
I felt it was the right thing at the time.
Yeah. And
I felt the evidence that, the people I speak to, not what's disseminated out there through media, but to a couple of people that I regard very highly, my doctor, who I know is a superstar, and he suggested it would be beneficial. So I'd take his word for granted.
That's fair.
Bearing in mind, I don't have a medical background, so I'm not, I might have a view on certain things, but put me on the spot and say, well, do you know much about COVID?
Yeah.
Well, what do I know about COVID? Apart from what I read. And the one thing I don't follow is the information that comes from the WHO, the World Health Organization. That's the first thing I dispense.
But I am curious because I want to know the people out there as well. It's like, I wonder how many people took the vaccine because they're scared of actually getting COVID. And do you think, was that a play in your...
There'd be a lot.
Are you scared of COVID?
Me, no. Personally, no. No. But I'm mindful of, let me just clarify that. Fear has been a huge issue. There's a lot of people would be fearful out there getting it. My view, and I'm not fearful of it, but I do follow the necessary steps. Mm-hmm. I'm very hygiene orientated. Mm-hmm. I'm mindful of social distancing. Mm-hmm. I wear my mask. Mm-hmm. So if you adopt those steps, I don't think there's anything to fear. Mm-hmm. Then you could open up and lead a normal life, which is what I do. So that's just me. Yeah. But I'm not fearful of it, no. And I've been tested a number of times, only because I've had to, because I was in hospital. Right. So in hospital, you've got to get tested.
Did you ever get it? Did you ever have it?
No, never.
Because if you tested positive, you could get a vaccine exemption too, You're not supposed to get the vaccine after you're having COVID, because then you've got the antibodies. So that would have been good for you. A lot of people, like I said, I don't discuss my vaccine status, and, I got kicked out of a cafe on the weekend because I refused to show either way. Do you think how do you feel about that happening in Australia?
I think it's a bit of an indictment, but I think also you've got to be very careful in as much as, not because of the stance you've taken. I'm looking from a commercial point of view. Mm-hmm. To say, if you're going to do harm to the proprietor, by putting him on the spot in that regard, it makes it very difficult, because I feel for the commercial side of things. Whilst you're entitled to do what you do, but do you realise you've harmed the guy that's probably been locked down for 270 days? He's got a mortgage, he's got rents behind, and he badly needs your business. But that's a decision you have to weigh up.
That's really interesting.
Well, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
I don't always see through the prism. I don't see always,
I went to speak to the guy afterwards, no cameras, no nothing, just like one-on-one, and he felt so terrible. He said, I just wish wish you could all come.
They all feel terrible.
And we really connected over that, because I felt bad because I got kicked out of a cafe. He felt bad that he had to kick me out. And it's like the government's actually creating so much division between so many people. I just don't know where to from here. Daniel Andrews. Look, let's get started on Daniel Andrews.
We're a loose collection of 6 fiefdoms run by emperors and emasculated by a prime minister who thinks clever spin and marketing is a solution. All these boundaries and factions have been created. How, in a moment like this of national security and importance, that we have all these divisions and boundaries, it is beyond my comprehension that we have not got a leader. I thought this is war, same thing, in national emergency. One suit fits all in that stage. You don't have individual emperors running, thumping their chests and saying, oh, this is my boundary. You don't have a boundary, mate. This is Australia. As I said earlier, we're the most diverse, intelligent, inclusive nation in the world, and we behave appallingly.
Yeah.
We are just tearing ourselves apart inwardly. Yeah. Now, whatever the motives are of some of the people at the helm, sort of bring us down the wonderful democracy that we have, I've got no idea. But I do know as a collective we need to defend it diligently.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, but for the contribution made by those that paid the ultimate price.
Yeah. And look, we are in a battle right now, but we're not dying. We're not like our ancestors. We can still fight more or less democratically.
We can.
And so that's what we need to do. Protesting as a freedom, a human right. I believe there's protests all week, this week against the bill.
They have.
Melbourne Cup Day. People are pretty annoyed that 10,000 people can go to Melbourne Cup Day.
Exactly.
And last week, we can't have more than 10 people in our house, but we can go to Melbourne Cup with 10,000 other people.
Yeah.
Just doesn't make logic.
Well, it defies logic. But then again, if you have a look at the pattern of decisions that are made all the way through,
There is no logic.
There's no logic.
You drive yourself crazy trying to make sense of it all.
But the other thing, like it's annoying issues.
Yeah.
Like the government minister drove 30 kilometres to go to a holiday house. She was pardoned by Andrews. The 10-year-old kid that got drowned at a swimming camp can only attend his funeral. It's insane. Protest marches, when they were told they were banned, were tolerated. Flares were fired in the middle of Lygon Street and at the ground. They were also banned, but they were tolerated. So it's almost policy on the run. It's a privileged few or whatever that sort of escaped the wrath.
With the protests, I will say they weren't tolerated. They started using rubber bullets, right?
Well, I understand that they used rubber bullets, but I'm just saying they were banned initially from protesting.
Yeah.
But when they did protest, it's
not really enough cops to stop it.
It's almost well, okay.
Yeah.
But Daniel Andrews said, no, you're not allowed to protest.
Yeah.
But they did.
Yeah.
Were there any ramifications? What was the ramification? Zero. So why aren't people sceptical? And why are they questioning? And why are they fearful? I'll tell you, because the state's got to a stage where they're perpetually aggrieved. And the welfare belt, and those that feel as though they've harshly done by, and that's why they support it. But we've got to give people incentive. And at the moment, Victoria's in a very sad state, unfortunately.
Yep. Okay, so you're vaccinated, which means that you have the official passport. You can do whatever you want.
Sure.
Now, I don't have the passport. How do you feel about me not being able to do what you can do based on your choices?
Well, look, I think over the period and looking at the rest of the world now, how it's settled, I don't think there's any problem. I wouldn't have any problem sitting alongside you, say, at an aeroplane or at a restaurant. No, for COVID reasons.
Yeah.
Even for social reasons, I might add.
It's so strange that people would be afraid of someone like me. I'm clearly healthy, young, nice person.
It is a sad state of affairs. And this is some of the issues that have emanated from this tyrannical approach that we've adopted, and it's wrong. And but the message out there, a chief health officer, for argument's sake, that example I quoted earlier about him not being able to exempt the kid that got drowned, to have more than 10 people at the funeral. He said, I couldn't get an exemption. Well, who overrules it? Where'd you get the right in the first instance?
Yeah.
Who overrules the chief health officer and the premier? There must be, don't tell me there's a third party lying around somewhere silently.
Who knows?
Who knows?
They've given us our rights. They've taken them all away and then they're giving them to us, which makes us feel indebted to them.
You know what infuriated me? Freedom Day.
Yeah.
I can't believe that there's people at midnight ran out straight to the bars and rejoiced being free. I was going to ring a friend of mine, Michael Tobin, at Tobin Funerals. I was going to get all the hearses out and get them to drive down all the main drags of all the social venues of Melbourne and remind people what really has happened, how their social rights have been eroded to the extent we're now getting fed a little bit of fodder.
Yep.
And we're rejoicing in it. She's taking everything back and giving us a little bit of a nibble, bits and pieces, and we're accepting it like sheep.
Yeah, it's scary. I was trying not to be happy either. I was like, I'm happy to go shopping, but I'm not happy. I'm not happy.
Well, totally. Here we are. It's Freedom Day. Like anyone just thought we'd just come back from, Gallipoli with a victory or something of that ilk.
We were free every day before this.
Freedom, exactly. The country's been free.
Oh gosh. Okay.
It just shows you what you can do, with a fear campaign and how the people will follow suit.
Well, this is the problem. You talk about us being united and fighting together, and that is the right answer. But I can't sit at a cafe and you can. We are actually completely divided.
I'll tell you something. Pardon my intrusion. I mentioned earlier about with 6 borders. We have got to a stage, that notion of, in Australia, I've got your back. That notion that I've got your back, let me tell you, it's been thrown right under the bus. That doesn't exist anymore in Australia. I've got your back. We've become a loose collection, I told you, of 6 divided states run by megalomaniacs. Not entirely, and supported by a Prime Minister and a cabinet I can't understand. Thinks that, clever marketing spin can solve our problems. For God's sake, don't people realise if you've got a pandemic, rightfully or wrongly, it's a national importance and needs a national strategy. So that's where I sit.
Okay, so what do you think is going to happen? Okay, let's think forward now. Okay, we've talked about the problems. So we've got the Daniel Andrews bill on the 16th.
Well, what's going to
happen?
happen?
The federal election, then we've got the state election.
Yeah, well, what's going to happen? I'll tell you what's happening.
Tell me.
In terms of the pandemic, well, you have a look at what Israel have done. Israel got nearly everyone boosted. So they've stayed open. Israel's strategy has always been from day one to stay open. They've had high numbers, but they've tolerated and held the line, and they've virtually got out at the other end. Boosts are out, whatever. What's going to happen here? Well, he's got the gerrymander. They're all changing, I don't know, the boundaries are being changed. Obviously the benefit. But I just hope people don't forget. People don't forget what has transpired. Mm-hmm. The carnage and the trail of debris that's left behind through ill decisions, poor decisions, and whatever the agenda is, it cannot be forgiven. And not only not forgiven, but it's got to be explained. Mm. Whether we have a royal commission or not, I don't care. But the real facts must come out. You can't suppress the tragedy, and who knows what the ramifications are and what the fallout's going to be in terms of, I'm not talking about social and economic. What about the psychological ones? Our kids haven't been schooled. And our next captains of tomorrow, God forbid, what have they got to look forward to? They've been schooled at home by parents. Without disparaging the parents.
They're not set up for school.
Yeah, so who knows what the fallout's going to be yet through some of these poor management decisions. But you can't allow the quarantining and the myriad and the litany of other mistakes that are made just sweep them under the carpet. All that's got to come out in the open. You've got to have the freedom of information. You've got to have access to all the files. And someone's got to be responsible. I'm going to say, if you did this in the private sector, we'd be in jail.
Yeah.
It's simple as that.
They can just say, we don't recall.
Yeah, and they can, well...
And that's it.
How embarrassing is that? I can't recall.
It was a month ago, mate. Come on. Of course you recall something. Oh, anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had amnesia too. Yeah. A heavy night, but not that bad.
Just voluntary amnesia for them.
So I just hope that, people don't forget. And I hope at the end of the day that we come out, with a positive agenda to make our country a more vibrant and to be what it's always been. Yeah. A robust, vital, full of vitality and, smart, intelligent people. Yeah. Looking after our children, looking after our families,
It's pretty basic Australian
altruism, stuff. Benevolence, philanthropy, all those wonderful things associated with democracy. And we want to pull these pillars down. I don't know why.
Well, we plan on educating people a lot before the elections, of course, on don't forget exactly what you said, and also, on campaigning for good people and candidates. Maybe you want to be a part of the Don't Forget campaign. Oh,
look, I've been campaigning in my own way for 50 years.
Good.
The one message I will make it quite clear to everyone. I know we've been roundabout, and I've probably fobbed and sat on the fence a bit, but the best advice I can give anyone is be the best person you can be yourself, because to influence others, and if you're not a good person, very difficult. But if you wake up, look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm going to be a decent, good folk and do the very best I can, well, let me tell you, if we could sort of replicate that all around the country, we'd fix half our problems.
Yeah. All right.
But it's all about being fair income.
Fair income. One more question. Is federal elections probably going to be around March?
Yeah.
Well, any predictions or any you want to show any support to anyone in particular, or anything you want to say about anything?
Look, my politics has been right at Genghis Khan. I never hide that. I'm all about egalitarian values. I'm all about freedom. I'm about the incentives. I'm about giving all the tools of trade to everyone to live the dream. Whatever they want, give them the tools to get better. Mm-hmm. But in the interim, I want some form of disciplines. I want a judiciary that, voices the opinion of the community and censors accordingly. I don't want anything hidden. I bring back, capital punishment's a dubious one, but I'd certainly eradicate the things of drugs in our country. You kill my children, I'm going to come after you at the very helm. Not the poor guy that's, selling a $50 tablet or something, but the guy at the very helm. Nothing's ever done about the helm. And also bring conscription back. Kids that are aimlessly walking around without direction, and I'd also make sure that, we've made some mistakes along the line, but if you can't feed them, don't breed them. I know it's a harsh rule, but you've got to give kids a chance and the opportunity. Yeah. And you can't become wardens of state. We've got to look seriously at doing, our very best. We've got to look after our kids, educate them, and give them the opportunity. Conscription doesn't hurt anyone. 2 years of military or a year of military training teaches you some very good values. Mm-hmm. We've got to do something about the water rights. This notion that, Collins Street doctors and lawyers and whatever have you can hold water rights when the poor farmer who's supplying all the food and feeding us and sustaining us, he's got to pay thousands of dollars for gigalitres of water. That's just insane. Yeah. Insane. The most arable land that needs water to feed us, they've got to buy water.
Yeah.
It just defies logic. Mm-hmm. We talk about our Indigenous brothers. Now look, I played football. I played with a lot of Indigenous friends of mine. A lot of them. I never formed judgment on colour, culture or creed. If you're a decent person, you're a decent person. There's no great divide. But there are issues that we could have done to help our Indigenous brothers. We all know the carnage that goes on up north, and the problems with, our literacy and numeracy levels. We know alcohol's a problem. But, all we do is give lip service and we give them millions and millions of dollars to an organisation that does very little. Yeah. We just... So many things are so obvious that we don't do them. I don't know why. I've got no idea, but it's and the frustrating part is they can all be solved. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can all be solved.
That's why you need to run. You can tell. Well, look. No, I'm joking. What do you think of the United Australia Party? They've got now over 70,000 members, biggest political party in Australia right now. What do you reckon is going to happen?
Look, my father's been a working migrant. Mm-hmm. I'm a champion of the people. I'm a worker's son, I'm a migrant son. Mm-hmm. Anything to benefit the worker and anyone to benefit the people of Australia, I'm all for. And if the United Party, I've got no idea what their strategies are or their policies, but I suspect, as the name implies, unification's a bloody good step forward. If we can act as a catalyst to bring us together as one, well, I support that wholeheartedly.
Yep. They've got billboards around. Have you seen the billboards?
No, I've seen some of them, yes. Yeah. But you've got to give people hope. Mm. The nation's forlorn. You've got to incentivate people. And, that's a priority. And people need to be cared for. You can't disenfranchise it. People to a large degree in this country have become the jetsam and the flotsam of our society. And it's not right. People need to be hugged and our loved ones need to be looked after. And our elderly need to be looked after. There's a number of strategies that can be employed. But that information needs to be disseminated from the corridors of power. But our corridors of power are they're too busy involved in infighting, imploding, and the opposition do nothing and let the incumbent lose. The opposition's got a moral obligation to come up with a valid alternative.
Opposition.
An opposition.
Yeah, that would be nice.
That'd be nice.
That'd be really nice.
So if anyone you're talking about your new party, tell them the first thing, come up with some alternative.
Yeah.
Because there are people out there that are looking for them.
Absolutely. That's why they've got 70 for that.
Well, if they're valid and they're good ones, all for them. Now, good on you.
One more thing, I promise. You just said you're doing a campaign soon to try and get us more tourism into Australia. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, tourism's an imperative. It's our bread and butter in a lot of instances. People flock to Australia. Australia's got so much to offer. People don't understand the diversity of Australia. I've been fortunate, as you know, through my lamb campaign, to travel the length and width and every nook and cranny in this country. And if you look at Australia's, I sometimes think of all the people that come to Australia because sometimes the enormity of the costs in airfares and accommodation. But most people only know the eastern seaboard and the western seaboard. But that's so much to offer. Central Australia, Darwin, the top end, Queensland. Every state has got so much to offer. And Australia is so vast. I mean, Australia's nearly the size of Europe. You fly from here to Darwin, it costs you 4.5 hours. You nearly fly from Portugal to Moscow.
It's true.
With a little bit of grunt on the pedal, but you know what I mean. Yeah. So tourism is a valuable commodity, and we need to promote it.
Yeah. Well,
but we don't need in Australia like we have at the moment. There's people in Australia that have been subjected to some very harsh pain that want to return to their original place of abode, which is even subjected to harsher penalties.
I know.
But they believe it's probably better off back there than what it is here at the moment. That's how bad it's got.
Pretty damaged. So hopefully tourists come and lift our spirits a little bit, So,
well, they'll lift us. The other thing that'll lift your spirits.
Yeah.
Now, you might think there's a modicum of commercialism associated with this. I want you to light a barbecue, put some nice lamb product on it, invite your neighbour, put your duke out there, regardless of colour, culture or creed. Come together as one, inclusion, and celebrate living in the best country on the planet. And remember the good times, and whatever you do, don't burn the cutlets. It's very, very important that they're just seared and got a bit of charcoal on them and a little bit of sauce sometimes, whatever you like. I personally like a bit of chilli. Sometimes I like to marinate them overnight, but it's a personal thing. But above anything else, we are fair dinkum Australia. We haven't lost it all. There've been a bit of undulation here and there. We've lost our way, but you know what? We're a resilient lot. We're strong. We can come together again. And as Scotty Palmer used to say, keep punching. It makes sense. I'm Sam Kekovich.